So we're almost done. What we still need to do is create the terrain shade effect, and then we need to take this to Google Earth and export it or save it as a KMZ file. So in terms of the terrain shade effect, there's a few ways to do this. I'll show you the very detailed step-by-step Photoshop way, and it's much more complicated than just simply changing a layer type in the layers panel. So you don't need to really memorize it, but I really recommend going through the motions at least once so you can say that you've done it. The other way is to apply a script. If someone has created a script, which in this situation they have, you can just do that, but there's a few caveats there. And the third way is actually rather interesting, and I'll explain more about that in a moment. But first, let's do the step-by-step Photoshop way. You'll want to take a deep breath and get your pause and play button ready, because I think you're going to need it. Let's get started. Step 1, highlight the DEM representation layer that you've created and select everything. You can either just drag a selection marquee around it or click on select and do select all. Select everything. Then you want to copy it. Use your shortcut or click on edit and copy. That just puts it on our virtual clipboard until we decide to paste it somewhere. And we're actually going to paste this in an alpha channel layer. We need to create it first. Click on Window, go to Channels. Now this is a representation of your color mode. In this instance it's RGB, so we've got a red, green, and blue channel, and you can selectively turn those on and off. We want them all on for right now. To create any additional channels, you can have as many as you want. You click on this flyout list and click on New Channel. The name doesn't really matter, just call it alpha something. The rest of your settings should look like mine. Click OK. So with that channel highlighted, in my situation, or in my Photoshop it's blue, we want to paste the stuff that's on our clipboard. Go to Edit and Paste, or use your shortcuts. Notice that it puts that graphic information, that visual information, inside of that alpha layer. That alpha layer just needs to exist, and we're actually going to use it and take it apart. You'll see in a couple of steps from now. So I'll take this layers, just move it off to the side. Oh, and before I do, make sure that it's not turned on, the visibility of it. We just want it to be there. Put that over here. Now we're going to create a shade layer, but we want to apply it to a new layer, not to one that already exists. So let's go ahead and create a new layer by clicking here, and we'll call this terrain shade. And I want you to fill that with the color white. Right now we've only got the extents of that lower layer selected, so do this. Click on select, do a deselect just so nothing is selected. Make sure that our new layer is highlighted. Make sure that white is in your foreground, and if it's not, again, just hit this little black and white reset button, hit the swap your foreground background button, and white should be in the front. With all that set, type Alt Delete, and that filled our shade layer with white. Next step, we are going to apply a filter. Click on Filter, go to Render, and select Lighting Effects. So yours will probably be populated with different information than what mine is, just because I've done this before. It may be set to default, and these are all set to different values. For the style, default will work, but let's select 2 o'clock spotlight. Hopefully you've got that. For the colors on the right-hand side, we want both of those to be white. And I'm just clicking in it. You can either select the upper leftmost corner, or you can just type a bunch of F's down here. That's the hexadecimal color code for white. And we want our light type to be directional instead of Omni or Spotlight, and you can see the effect in your little preview window. Very important. The texture channel, this is the framework that this texture or this lighting effect will be applied to. You want to select the channel that we just created. So my alpha 1. Now for the negative, let's put in 13, and for the rest of these, I'll just type 0. That's a good starting point in which you can come back and adjust as necessary. So the final thing before we click OK is to change the source of our light and the direction of our light. And we can do that with this little preview window here. The white dot, I believe, is the source of your light. No, I'm sorry, that's the direction of your light. The little black square is the source of your light. And we want the source of the light to be coming somewhere from the bottom, just because this is in the northern hemisphere. If you're in the southern hemisphere, you'll want it to be the other way around. Now I can see in my preview, it's very subtle, but I can see some color being shown up. There's a little bit easier to see. Just use your discretion. You don't want it too dark, you don't want it too light. You just want to see a little bit of texture showing up. So that looks good in mine. Hopefully yours does too. When you're ready, click OK. Computer thinks for a little bit, takes that texture map, and if I zoom in, you can see what it's done here. Very subtle, but it's there. Next step is to make this so we can see the map underneath it come through it. Let's actually get rid of layer 1. You don't need that anymore. With texture shade selected in your layers, hit the drop-down list and select multiply. So with multiply, it removes white completely. Anything else gets set to a level of transparency, and it sort of works, but not really, because it's just kind of this muddy, monotonous gray. We can adjust that even further using the levels adjustments palette. So here's what you do for that. Highlight that terrain shade layer, click on image, adjustments, and select levels. So here you'll see what's called a histogram. It shows you the distribution of colors in whatever you have selected. So our colors in this layer are just grays. It goes from white to black. That's what's represented here. And the reason we've got this big black streak here is saying most of your colors in this layer are gray. Without explaining what's going on here, just drag these little color handles at the bottom, move them in much closer to that black area, and you'll see an effect right away. I'm just really concerned more about presentation here than accuracy. As long as the direction of your shade is accurate, I'll be happy. So you want to play with those until it looks reasonable. No, that's not so bad. And then hit OK. Let's get that out of the way. So a little bit darker than the last example that I used, but it still works. You know, Los Alamos, the city community is here. Sun is coming from the south. This part of the hill would be shaded. That part would be illuminated, and you can turn that on and off. Now let me zoom out just a little bit. When we were mosaicing, we ended up with a little bit of extra edge here just because of the nature of the transformations. Easy fix for that is to just crop it down a little bit. So I'm grabbing my crop tool, and I think it even snapped to this layer. And at this point, you could even flatten this. So a couple more things before we save this and import it into Google Earth. You could do it right now, but we've got the issue of file size, which I've mentioned before. I don't want these files to be too big when you email them or send them to Blackboard. And we've still got this alpha channel that exists. And typically alpha channels will set a part of your drawing to be transparent, in which case that transparency would show up in Google Earth. Just get rid of it. We don't need it anymore. The only point of its existence was to create that shading map. The other thing is to make our file size much smaller. I'd probably normally want to save this as so I've got a nice high resolution version that I could use later on in ArcGIS, but for now we just need to make it smaller. You'll probably want to make a backup, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to resize this by going to image size, and I'll take it down to about 30%. And let's try 50. That's still reasonable. 8.5 megabytes, 8.15. Hit OK. It resizes. All I can do now, or all I have to do, is save this. I should have probably renamed it, but oh well. So we're ready to go to Google Earth and import this. Here's the last example I did. I'll just turn that off. Let's zoom out. File, import, navigate to that one we just created. And if everything was done correctly, rather quickly, it should zoom in, import the data, and look like this. I'll click OK. So not too bad. I just happen to have my terrain turned on. Turn that back off. But there's one small caveat here. If I adjust my transparency, whoops, I have to make sure that it's highlighted. I can see it doesn't quite line up. That whole area there is probably a bad example. Let's find an area with, there we go. Okay, there I can see this building here. It's off by about, I don't know, 50 or so feet. That gets to a very technical component of all of this. If I go back to Photoshop, and if I take a look at my coordinate system, when things are transformed, there's always a little bit of technical know-how that you need to get things perfect. So if I were to transform this, and we've done this before in class, I can just select a new one, but we've got our pixel size we can adjust, we've got our resampling size, and I believe there's even more. So if I say I just want to do NAD 83 and choose some arbitrary one, somewhere in here, oh, here we go, the pixel dimensions. If you click on that, where was it? Oh, there we go, I'm sorry. It was the Datum Shift is what I was looking for. This is where you can get in and specify different mathematical models. Honestly, if you did a lot of trial and error, I'm sure you could find the correct one to get this perfect. But I'm going to do cancel, cancel, and we'll just do, you know, the poor landscape architecture student way of getting this thing to line up. And that is to right-click on the imported file, go to Get Info on Windows, that'll say Properties, change our opacity just enough so we can see through our imported graphic, and then grab the center of this big green X. Now this is just moving it in Google Earth. I'll just kind of move that over until it looks like it lines up. There we go. Looking at this intersection right here. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll be pretty darn close. When that looks better, change your opacity back up, hit OK. The final step to all of this, you know, maybe just give it a quick look at the edges to make sure things line up. This one looks pretty darn good. Of course it does. And we need to save this as a KMZ. Last step, right click, save place as, give it a name, upload it to Blackboard, and call it good. So I actually don't have enough time to show you the other two ways to apply this. I'll save that for class. So you got everything you need to know to complete this assignment. Good luck, and I will see you soon.